Now, our second story for this edition of the Rolling Stone is, it kind of acts as a caveat to our first story, right? Because the first story kind of got about to how the right, if it really wants to change the culture, if it really wants to work for substantial, long-lasting change, it's going to have to start cultivating storytellers, artists, activists, organizers on its own side so that it can fight the left on its own terms. Well, this story is a caveat, okay? Because it shows the dangers of what's happening when the right basically becomes the left. The right, in order to counteract the left, for all intents and purposes, becomes the left. And it comes to us courtesy of Candace Owens, who actually, coincidentally, also kind of featured in our first story this week. Now, specifically what happened this past week on her this past week's episode of her podcast, the Candace Owens Show, she had on as her guest Dennis Prager, and they were talking. And during the episode, Candace Owens reiterated a point that she made at CPAC earlier this year in February, okay? That Native Americans, American Indians, were cannibals, okay? Now, specifically, in this podcast episode, she was talking to Dennis Prager about how the left does not seem to understand that there is a world outside of America, and that the world began in 1776. So everything bad with the world comes from America and the United States. And so she was talking about how, that's garbage, that's not true. And then she linked it back to her CPAC speech, where she said, if it wasn't for white Europeans coming here and pretty much colonizing the New World, then there would still be cannibalism here. There would still be sacrifices, because she was saying, it's been proven that Indians were cannibals. They sacrificed thousands of people. She specifically mentioned the Aztecs, said that, yes, even the New York Times had to run a piece about it, so it's been proven. Okay, that was basically her point. If white Europeans had not come to the New World, North and South America, then there would still be cannibalism and human sacrifices here, because American Indians were into that sort of thing. And we don't know about that, of course, because the left has propagated this idea that the Indians were all basically hippies, right from the 70s. They were all one with nature and communal and living in peace and harmony. And then all of a sudden, the white man came and enslaved them all and killed them all with disease, etc., etc. This is what happens when history is simplified to one point in order to counteract a political narrative. Because Owens is right, and at the same time, she is so wrong. Okay, she's right on a technical level. She's right, because the one Indian tribe, the one Indian race, okay, if I'm allowed to use that word, that she mentions, the Aztecs, which technically, yes, were American Indians because they were in North America, but they are not American Indians when we think of American Indians, because, again, of course, the Aztecs were indigenous to Mexico. Mexico City is built on the old Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. Okay, little historical fact for everyone today. It is absolutely 100% true that the Aztecs had human sacrifices. Thousands upon thousands of human sacrifices. Completely true. We know this for a fact. We have the archaeological evidence. It is also true that the Aztecs, at least the upper classes of the Aztecs, we're talking about the royalty, the nobility, the priestly caste, the warrior caste, that they did engage in ritual cannibalism. We don't have to rely just on contemporary Spanish sources for that either. Okay? We have archaeological evidence. We have bones of people that have been excavated that have signs of cannibalism on them. It basically is about how the bones are preserved. That shows that they were burned, and then they have knife cuts on them as if you were cutting off meat. And so, I mean, we put all of this together, and it's cannibalism. Okay, that is absolutely true. If she had said that some Native Americans engaged in cannibalism, then what she said wouldn't really be as big of a deal. Unfortunately, she was not specific. She just said American Indians, and then she threw out the Aztecs later on. A lot of tribes, a lot of American Indian tribes, condemned cannibalism. Some tribes, for example, that condemned them: the Sioux, the Cree, the Cherokee, big tribes, they all condemned cannibalism. It was a huge taboo for these tribes. In fact, if you want to see how much of a taboo it was, in the Algonquin tribe, which also included the Algonquins and then their cousins, the Mohawks and the Iroquois, there was a legend of a creature called the Wendigo. Now, you might have heard of the Wendigo. And if you haven't, that's okay. Basically, what the Wendigo was, it was a cannibalistic monster or spirit that hunted in the forest. It was sort of like the boogeyman for those tribes, because if you were out hunting and you were in a strange part of the forest, away from your friends, if you couldn't find your village again, then you could be legitimately afraid, like the Wendigo was going to hunt you, that the Wendigo was going to come for you. What is interesting, now the Wendigo, like I said, was cannibalistic. The Wendigo ate people. What's interesting is that the Wendigo, the monster, according to the Algonquins and the Iroquois and the Mohawks, used to be a human being. The Wendigo was a human being who had eaten human flesh. For whatever reason, just for kicks, because he was starving, doesn't matter. If a person ate human flesh, he was transformed into a Wendigo. And then that was his curse. He was completely cut off from human society, from his family, from his friends, from his tribe. He was an outcast. He was a monster who was now cursed, essentially, to continue hunting people and eating them to satisfy his perpetual hunger. Okay, this was serious stuff for the Indians. So when they said that, yeah, cannibalism is no good, I mean, they meant it. This is part of the problem. And this is a problem that the right is falling prey to. Because, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, if Owens had simply directed her comments against the Aztecs, against the Inca, I know that the Inca had human sacrifices. They might have had cannibalism too. I'm not sure about that. I know for sure that the Aztecs had both. Yeah, definitely human sacrifices, but also cannibalism. If she had kept her remarks just directed to the Aztecs, there wouldn't be a problem. But because she included all of these American Indian tribes, basically all the tribes, she just said Native Americans, that's when it becomes not just problematic, I hate that word, but it becomes ahistorical. And this actually highlights a couple of problems. First off, we are becoming a society where left and right, history doesn't matter anymore. History is just completely thrown to the wind. We simplify history to such a ridiculous degree, and everyone is doing it. On the left, a prime example is the 1619 Project. evil comes from slavery. Everything wrong with America today comes from slavery. Traffic jams, that's because of slavery and racism. I mean, seriously, the sugar supply, that comes from slavery and racism. The poverty rate, the obesity rate, the homeless rate, the fatherlessness rate in black societies, it all comes from slavery. That is the sole root cause of every problem in the black community today, and for a large part, all the problems that America had, because it is fundamentally unjust, unequal, and unfree, unless you are a privileged white person. That's on the left. On the right, you have this idea that has been, to have one example, that has been peddled by several people on the right, like Tim LaFay, I believe his name was, or Tim LaHaye, actually, saying that basically all the founding fathers were evangelical Christians. They were contemporary 21st century evangelical Christians. And, that's basically the sum total of the American Revolution. Which, again, is not 100% true. Because there were some evangelicals there, but it was much more Congregationalist, Methodist, and also it was much more Orthodox than a lot of evangelical churches today. Okay? And also, it completely ignores all the other influences in the American Revolution. Did Christianity play a big part in the American Revolution? Absolutely. But also, the Scottish Enlightenment did. The British common law tradition did. The classical example, especially of the Roman Republic, played a huge part in the American Revolution. But this is what we have come to. Everything being simplified down. So the richness of history, the different facets of it, that's all been taken away. We have deliberately whittled it down, smoothed it down, so we can basically form a polished stone that we can use to throw at our opponents. If you're on the left, then you throw it at the right. If you're on the right, then you throw it on the left. This is what we've come down to, and this is what the right has come down to, which is, in a sense, it is completely ironic. Or as Danny DeVito says in Batman Returns, tragic irony or poetic justice? You tell me, kid. Well, he didn't have the kid, I added that. But, so that I wouldn't be accused of plagiarizing it. But it's tragic irony or poetic justice that this has happened, because the right is, again, supposed to all be about facts and reason and logic and just follow the facts. And yet, in order to beat back this simplified historical narrative on the left, have done the exact same thing. I don't particularly like the 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche has a lot of problems in his philosophy, but I greatly enjoy. He's not totally wrong on everything. I don't think, it's very hard for one person to be completely wrong about everything. Usually there are at least one or two specks of gold dust in anyone that you can find and say, oh, they got that right. Oh, I agree with this. One of those specks of gold dust for me with Nietzsche is his quote that those who fight monsters must take care not to become monsters themselves. That is a quote that has a ton of power behind it because it has a ton of truth behind it. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing in America today. The right, more and more, to defeat the left is becoming a reflection of the left. They are not preserving history in this specific example. They are simply using history as a cudgel, which is a disservice for everyone. Candace Owens says that she became a conservative or someone on the right simply by following the facts and letting the facts lead her wherever they would. Gesundheit. But how are other people going to follow the facts when the facts have been simplified down, when other facts have been completely changed, or when other facts have been are not mentioned anymore? Look, I'm not going to deny, in this specific example, again, I'm not going to deny that the left has warped our sense of history, particularly when it comes to the colonization of the New World, right? Whereas they like to say that all the American Indian tribes were living in relative peace and harmony. I mean, that's at least the image that we get. That's completely not true. There was warfare, there was great brutality before Europeans came, because people are people. But on the other hand, did European settlers commit a lot of things that we wish today hadn't happened? You're damn right they did. You're damn right that they did. More than their fair share. Because people are people. And people have fallen natures. And therefore, we listen to our bad impulses a lot more than our good impulses. We, more often than not, do not listen to the better angels of our nature. We listen to the bad angels. Okay? That is a universal human problem. If I can be theological for a moment, that's the proof of original sin right there. As G.K. Chesterton said, original sin, it's the one tenet of Christianity that is absolutely irrefutable, because to prove it, all you have to do is read the news. On any given day, just open a newspaper, open your news app, log on to the internet, go to CNN, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, whatever news site fits your cup of tea, and just start listening and reading, and proof aplenty of fallen human nature. But the right, if the right is actually going to be conservative, if it actually is going to conserve things worth preserving and conserving, like the truth, then it has to preserve the truth. Gold and warts, okay? You can't just keep the gold and hide away the warts under a ton of makeup and gold paint. We want the truth, warts and all. That's the only way. That is the only way that you are actually going to defeat the left. That's the only way that you're actually even going to have any peace in your own heart, because deep down, if you are an introspective person, if you do a little bit of research, you're going to know that the bill of goods that you're being sold on either side isn't the whole truth. So there's that. And then you are doing a disservice. If you're one of those people who are packaging this simplification of history, this whittling and narrowing down of the truth, if you're one of the people who's actually packaging that to people, you are doing people a grave disservice. Because you are betraying the very thing that you claim to be preserving, the truth, and history, and all the rest of it. If you do that, then you're no better than the left. And you're doing it simply to throw red meat to your audience. You're doing that just to get clicks and likes on social media, and to, again, throw those stones at your political enemy. If you want to change minds, again, going back to that first story where we were talking about story, if you really want to truly change society, culture, the country, the world for the better, you have to tell stories, but those stories have to be true. They can't just be fictional fiction. They can't just be fiction to plug your own version of what you want things to be, or how you would like things to have been. You can't do that. It's the truth or nothing, because if it's not the truth, then you're no better than an ideologue. You're just an ideologue on the right instead of an ideologue on the left. That is story number 2.